This is episode 21 of the Discipleship Directives, your podcast with Dr. Dan Crawford. He is the founder of DiscipleAllNations.org. My name is Vidal, and I am your host. Thank you for connecting and joining our podcast today. You know, many of you know that Dr. Crawford, besides being the founder and the president of DiscipleAllNations.org, he is also the senior professor emeritus at Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. Dr. Crawford, beautiful day, beautiful springtime, almost springtime. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We're waiting on springtime in North Texas. It's not quite here yet.
But you can feel it, right? It's coming. It's coming.
It's coming. I know it's coming. It's come every year about this time.
You know, sometimes I'm hesitant, and I love to suggest to you, if there was a way to do that, which is, I don't think it is, that we should be recording our podcast outside, not inside. Before we get the 103 degrees in South Texas. But anyways, I know Fort Worth and Dallas also, they get kind of a hit with the severe weather as well. But Dr. Crawford, is a special day today for multiple reasons. We get to talk about Jesus. We get to celebrate the goodness of the Lord. And part of it is having you come down to South Texas on a monthly basis. And through that ministry in partnership with the Valley Baptist Missions Education Center, you personally have been able to create, build, and experience new relationships. You are a pastor and you love pastors. And this morning, we do have a pastor and we have a special guest. And I'm speaking of my brother, Pastor Pedro Peña. Brother Peña, how are you feeling today? How are you?
Doing great, brother.
It's good to have you, man. And thank you for taking the time. It's good to see you. And love for you to give us a quick update. What is happening today? What is going on in life, family, church, for that matter? How things are going for you?
Everything is going great. We've been seeing a very positive change at church recently. Thank God for that. I've been at local church, Iglesia Bautista Belén, for about 9 years already as pastor. And, we serve there with my family. I got my wife. I got 4 kids. And we've been there for a while, and it's just been getting better. You know, every day it gets better. Praise God for that. We just come out of the pandemic where we took a big hit, but we're coming back up again, steadily, slowly but surely. We're marching on forward on that.
That's wonderful. That's great news to hear. It's always, we never apologize for good seasons in life and ministry. And I've known you for a couple of years now, and your faithfulness in ministry is paying off. So one of the things that I think you will find and have found attractive and relevant with Dr. Crawford's teaching and his ministry is that you, like myself, we have college kids at home, and we are going through that season, which Dr. Crawford comes from that legacy of student ministry. And thank you, Pedro, for joining us. It's good to have you, brother. Dr. Crawford, speaking of seasons in life, this past month, when you were in South Texas, speaking to pastors, you spoke, the topic, the kind of an overarching view of the teachings through 2023 is basically discipleship, which I know that's exactly what you bring into the conversation through your writings and through the ministry, spiritual formation. And one of the things that you mentioned of 2 targets that Satan attacks in order to create conflict in ministry. 2 targets that Satan creates in order to two targets that Satan attacks in order to create conflict in ministry. Can you help us and elaborate on what you meant by that?
I can, and I don't know that I talked about it very much. I actually gave some books away where I've written about it, and let that cover the subject more than me talking about it. But I learned some new things about that. I was interim pastor at First Baptist Church in Lawton, Oklahoma, which is the home of Fort Sill Army Post. And the church is filled with military and retired military. But I learned while I was there. I've been interim pastor there twice, and the first time I was there was when we were involved in Desert Shield, and Desert Shield became Desert Storm, and something happened in that conflict that impressed me. I've not studied military science. I didn't know this ahead of time, but when we turned Desert Shield into Desert Storm and we attacked one night, basically we turned the tide of the battle there, and it was won. I'm talking about the U.S. troops, because we attacked two targets. We attacked the enemy's ability to communicate. We went after television stations and broadcast towers and so forth. And the second target was their ability to counterattack or to go on the offensive. We attacked missile sites and runways and so forth. And it dawned on me that Satan is a pretty good military strategist. And while that worked for the U.S. forces that night, Satan's been using that same strategy for a long time. And when he goes after the church or goes after Christians, he's real good at hitting these two targets. He attacks our ability to communicate. In other words, he hampers our prayer life. We find that we don't have time to talk to God like we used to, or whatever, and we don't talk to each other as much, and we just get hindered in our communication abilities and skills. And the second thing he attacks is our offense. In other words, you could call that evangelism or missions or ministry, but our willingness and our passion to share the good news with people, either verbally sharing it or sharing it through some act of kindness that would help them understand the good news. And Satan has a great track record attacking those two areas in churches and among Christians. So those were the two targets that I made reference to and wrote about. And I learned that in a military town, in a military church, during a military conflict that was going on in the world, and have applied it to Christianity.
It's hard to believe that the reference that you're making has been, 30 years ago, pretty much, something like that?
Maybe not quite that long, but it's been a long time. I was interim pastor at First Baptist Lawton, Oklahoma twice. The first time was a long time ago, and then I went back a second time, and I was there nearly 3 years.
Oh, okay.
They were threatening to hang my picture in the hallway with all the pastors because I think I had more tenure than some pastors in their history.
Yeah. Hey, Pedro, so, man, this topic of the attacks from Satan, you and I get to serve here in South Texas, and we get to minister and work with our churches, in your case, pastoring the local church. What have you seen, brother, when it comes to Satan's attacks? What have you seen? What do you see in our generation, in our time? You and I were similar in age, and we're kind of in the same scenario, as parents and marriage and things like that. When you hear Dr. Crawford speak of the attacks at a personal level, tampering on prayer life, and then obviously the local church, what are your thoughts on that, Pedro?
Well, what I've been seeing is, since we're in the information age, communication is key. Even though the data or the information is available online, the way you interpret data is very important. And that's one of the areas that, like brother was sharing regarding, or the misinformation at times, that causes conflict inside the church. It causes a lack of communication because one party sees things one way, another side sees things another way. But through the classes, through the teachings of Dr. Crawford, it allows us a different perspective to try to maintain that unity, to keep marching forward. One of the topics, or one of the points that he made that I really enjoyed last time, when the last class we were there, he said, notice that there's no armor for your back because we're always marching forward. And even through those times that we, as a local church, that we didn't have all the members, some of the members left because of one reason or another. It was always a blessing and a motivation to go to the classes, hear these teachings, see that I'm not alone, see different strategies, different perspectives to keep marching forward. And like you said, now we're getting to reap, from all that work that we've been putting in. And it's just really been a blessing because at times, the information or the misinformation causes conflict. It causes to look at different perspectives, and we just need to step back and realize who we're working for, realize who's the one that's in charge, and listen to him direct all of us together. And that brings us all together as far as allowing us to work together for God, the extension of God's kingdom.
Definitely. You're right on the money, brother. And Dr. Crawford, when I listen to Pedro reminds us of some of these principles, expanding on what you just said, I guess one of the questions that I have for you, Dr. Crawford, and for you, Pedro, as well, in relationship to Satan's attacks, we were speaking earlier, previous podcast, on the Beatitudes and the coming back to the basics. And one of the basics that I'm thinking of, and again, using the analogy of warfare, strategies, and things like that from the military, when we read in the scriptures, especially in that Caesarea Philippi conversation, when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" and goes into the conversation where finally Peter is going to make that, statement, revelation that you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. My understanding is that Jesus is positioning the church in an offensive behavior attitude. That analogy that you just mentioned, Pedro, of the shield, it's only in the front because we are in attacking mode versus defensive line. So, Dr. Crawford, any thoughts on that? On the church being on offensive line? The weapons that we use to move forward. Any thoughts on that on that subject?
I liked one of the responses that came out of the audience in the morning session. I said, there's no armor for the back. And somebody said, because God has our backs. And that's a popular phrase these days about having somebody's back. I never really put those two together, but he does. And not only does he have our backs, but we're commissioned to go forward and not to turn and run the other direction away from the conflict or the opportunities or whatever. And the other thing I said was very interesting to me about the armor is so many people talk these days about praying on your armor every morning. And I said, my question is, why did you take it off the night before? Satan is the prince of darkness. He's going to wear you out before breakfast. You start taking your armor off at night. And besides that, the Roman soldiers, when the enemy was near, they slept in their armor. Mm-hmm. So I love the idea, and it is just a word game, but I love the idea of acknowledging the armor every morning. Mm-hmm. But I don't like the idea that says you get to take it off because Satan's waiting for us to take it off.
And again, you mentioned about earlier that it's not what we do, is who we are. It's an identity issue. Yeah. So this is part of, that armor becomes a lifestyle on that. Pedro, you've been at your church for 9 years, you mentioned, brother. So you have seen a lot in the last 9 years. So tell us, brother, what it's been like to shepherd for, just looking back where the church was 9 years ago, see God at work. And where you are today, what have you seen? What is it that the Lord has allowed you to experience in a sense of that offensive, proactive mindset for the church? What's taking place in your midst?
What God has allowed me to see at our local church is the mentality of a lot of the brothers are changing. Initially, when we had gotten there, it was a church that wanted to keep to itself, a church that did not like sharing its facilities, a church that did not like having fellowship with other churches. And God, through the years, has been working in the hearts of the brothers at our church, in which they see things in a different light, and I think God has been the one that's been making that impact in the sense where they've even given us, myself as a pastor, a lot of freedom. Here locally, if there's a church or a ministry that needs a facility, I don't have the red tape anymore. Now the members of the church are open to share our facilities, because we now have been able to see as a whole, as a church, that everything that we have, God gave it to us. We're not in competition with any other churches. We're here to work together, to march forward together, and we have a lot more fellowship. We have a lot more activities with different churches working together, along with these classes. Right now, I'm getting more people coming to the classes with us, and it gets us all in the same boat, on the same same traction, marching forward. That type of mentality. Don't look back, march forward. Things happen in the past. God helps us move forward, not to go backwards.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. By the way, Pedro, we're only a few weeks from Resurrection Sunday. What's cooking? Where are you guys doing for that celebration as a church? Is there anything specific that you're preaching on that you are? I mean, I know what you're preaching on, but I mean, like anything out of the ordinary, moving into the, Good Friday, Resurrection Sunday.
On Resurrection Sunday, what we do is we start our service at 6 a.m. and we stay there till noon. We go out there, we have a service at 6 a.m. and then when we finish our morning service, I'll prepare something. Sometimes it'll be a play. Sometimes I'll prepare something along the way. We have breakfast there at church, and then we follow our program. And normally, they enjoy, the church enjoys, the congregation enjoys the fellowship, that we end up having lunch there. And we'll spend there from 6 a.m. till 2, 3 in the afternoon. And it's amazing, how when you're in the works of the Lord, time just flies. And we're able to have that fellowship. And I always, I mean, obviously the topic is the resurrection, the victory, but we always try to tie in a different point, a different aspect, a different angle to keep it fresh for everybody who's there listening.
That's wonderful. I think one of the reasons why you guys see time flying quick and fast is because you like each other. Dr. Crawford, don't you agree that when you like each other, time goes fast? And that's helpful in ministry and marriage. When you like each other, it's always a good thing. So let's keep that moving on that. Dr. Crawford, you mentioned earlier of a book or resources that you have written on the issue of spiritual warfare, the attacks from Satan and things like that. Where can we get those resources? What, you've written so much, but help us and remind us, where can we get access to some of these resources?
Well, I gave away some books that last time I was down there, and I ran out. People took them. I mean, I didn't know they were going to take that many, but I'll bring some more. It has to do with the spiritual warfare and the armor of God and so forth. But one that I did mention that would be good to mention again, I happen to have it here. It's called Coping with Conflict, a Measure of Discipleship. And it basically deals with the passage in Ephesians that talks about hard pressed but not crushed, perplexed not in despair, persecuted not forsaken, struck down but not destroyed, and the treasure in earthen vessels. This book never really got off the market. The publisher went out of business and disappeared. We can't even find them to see if they had some books. But there are a few of them every now and then that show up on Amazon.com, but it's basically disappeared. But it's on my website. So if you go to discipleallnations.org, one word, discipleallnations.org, up in the right-hand corner of that first page, it says free ebooks. You click on that, and it'll take you to, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 books that are out of print, and this one is there. So you can actually read everything in the book online. Don't click print. You'll print off a lot of pages. Just read it online. And if you need to pause, you can go back to it again and scroll down to the page you were on. So it's available. It's free. Discipleallnations.org. Free ebooks, and you can get to that book. But it deals basically not so much with satanic conflict, although that's part of it, but it just deals with conflict in ministry and how Paul said we overcome that. We're struck down, but we're not struck out. We're not defeated. We just seem to keep coming into conflicts. Some of that's internal. Some of it comes from the people we're around. Some of it God allows, but then some of it comes from Satan also.
Some of it we created, right? Because sometimes we're just
We do create our own conflict sometimes.
yeah, we do definitely we do those things. Pastor Pedro, we are so appreciative of your time. I know days are short in a sense of just so much to do and taking you taking time of your busyness. Thank you so much. Is there any thoughts, I mean, our audience typically are pastors, this is kind of a follow-up from the monthly meetings with Dr. Crawford. So pastors are going to listen to this podcast, brother. Any thoughts that you might want to share to encourage the local church, to encourage families, maybe in the topic of conflict, or any other thing that you would like to share before we go?
Well, conflict will always be around. And we, as pastors, as leaders of the church, we need to learn to deal with conflict. And in the teachings that Brother Crawford has been given, it's been great, honestly. I want to take the time to thank Brother for making time out of his busy schedule. I'm a bivocational pastor, so my time I'm always tied up. And it's great that he takes time out of his schedule for us down here as pastors, as leaders of the churches, so that we can learn more. We always need to learn. We always need to learn. Anybody who's listening who perhaps has not made the time, it's time very well invested to go out there, have the fellowship, learn what Brother brings to us, show us some things we've seen, and we get to see it in a different light. Some things are new, completely, and that's great. We always want to keep learning. It's great that it's open not only to the pastors, but also to the leaders of the church, in which we have that blessing to bring others with us, be on the same page. So keep marching forward, add to that momentum. And it's not just for the local church, but rather, for the whole church in general, the universal church, that we got to be on the same page. We got this battle. We see things happening that it brings back a much greater sense of urgency, that we can't allow it to just stop. We have to keep going forward. We have to keep pushing forward, and it should be a part of all of our calling. We're called to ministry to keep marching forward, to keep learning, to keep bringing others with us, so that we can fulfill the will of God and what He has called for each and every one of us. So if anybody's out there hasn't had the opportunity or hasn't made the time, I urge you to make the time. Write it on your calendar. We've been doing this for over a year, and it's been great. It's been worth it. I've even had to sometimes I ask time off from work, and my boss has allowed me to leave, and it's great. He goes, he sees that even what I'm learning at a ministry level also helps me here in my vocational level, which is great, because that's the way God works. God works in all aspects of our life.
That's right. We spoke of redeeming the time, and you're redeeming that field of of the marketplace where you elaborate. And Dr. Crawford, Pedro is a perfect example of what we were talking about because of the bivocational component. As you know, more and more pastoral ministry is going to move into bivocational. Yes. So you coming down to South Texas, Dr. Crawford, allows us to have access to theological training, to once again reawaken ourselves back to the basics, as we said earlier, but specifically into the issue of a spiritual formation. Dr. Crawford, you are a pastor. You are a man who loves the local church and loves pastors and loves students. And we pray at previous podcasts over Beach Reach, spring break down here in South Padre Island. But you are preaching on a weekly basis, the church that you are interim right now. What's coming up on your preaching calendar? What are you preaching on? I mean, we're right here in the middle of all this season of celebration and the resurrection of Jesus. What are you preaching on?
Well, I love to preach a series of sermons. And so moving towards Easter Sunday, I'm preaching a series of sermons called Famous Last Words. And there are a lot of those. A lot of people have said things as they were dying, and I use some of those illustrations, but the basic part of the sermon is the 7 statements that Jesus made from the cross. So we focus on those, finishing up on the Monday, Thursday service before Easter that weekend. And I think the church has prepared some kind of dramatic presentation for that night. We observe the Lord's Supper on Thursday night, and then we don't meet on Good Friday, but Sunday morning we'll have big Easter service. I think I'll preach on the resurrection.
Well, that's always a win. That's always a win. It's a beautiful time to celebrate. And Pastor Pedro, again, thank you for your time. And man, it just clicked on me that you guys do the sunrise service, the 6 a.m. in the morning on Sunday. Dr. Crawford, you remember those days?
We do it at where I'm interim pastor. We did it last Easter, and I'm still interim pastor at the same church. So it's up on a hill. It's called Trinity Hills. It overlooks downtown Fort Worth, and we will be out there worshiping when the sun comes up.
That's a beautiful experience.
And then we'll have breakfast together and move right on into the services. We don't stay till 2:00, but we're not quite that committed to it.
Well, the thing is, for Pedro, I'm assuming that you guys don't make any changes on your regular Sunday morning services.
No.
You carry on into Sunday school and then worship service, because as you know, there will be visitors that may not come to the sunrise service, but they will come to the regular service, right? Well, thank you both. Thank you both for what you do for the local church. Thank you for what you do for your service unto the Lord and to your families, and especially as you serve pastors, because I know, Pedro, you play a role in our denominational work here and the networking. You spoke of the networking. I've seen you at work, and brother, you're a blessing to the kingdom. You're a blessing to the things that the Lord has placed you, especially in the city of West Laco. That's where you are, right at the epicenter of this beautiful Rio Grande Valley, which I know Dr. Crawford loves a lot. So, folks, thank you for your time. Love for you to come and visit discipleallnations.org. Follow our social media channels. If you are gracious enough, please share this podcast with somebody and subscribe to the page. Pastor, thank you for coming and joining, Pedro. God bless. Have a wonderful rest of the week. And Dr. Crawford, we'll see you next week. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Pedro.
This is episode number 3 of Discipleship. This is a Directives podcast and Dr. Crawford. I'm here this morning. Dr. Crawford, how are you?